Welcome back to the Alts Podcast. I'm your host, Horacio Ruiz. We bring you industry leaders and creators to give their insights on the rapidly changing and exciting world of alternative assets. Opinions expressed on this podcast by the host and podcast guests are for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Podcast hosts and guests may maintain positions in the offerings discussed in this podcast. The intro song, Fishing for Pets, is written and composed by Alan Goldshire from his latest release, Live at the Lakeview Lounge. Hey guys, thank you for joining me on the podcast. Today, Alt meets Alts. I spoke with Leore Avidar, the founder and CEO of Alt, which is an online platform for trading cards with an exchange, weekly auctions, and vaulting services. Alt is also pioneering lending services for alternative assets and started a multi-million-dollar fund composed of blue-chip trading cards. This is a good one about the card industry, but we also have a discussion around investment-grade assets and the notable rise in the alternative assets industry. All right, guys. So today we got a great guest. We got the founder and CEO of Alt, Leore Avidar. Leore, thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many things to talk about, really. And I just want to say that you were one of the guys that kind of opened my eyes a little bit when I first listened to you a couple months ago about trading cards in terms of like scarcity and, low pop cards. And so I just wanted to, throw that out there that you're really kind of one of the guys that was kind of moving that needle a little bit.
Appreciate that.
So, you have this great platform, Alt, trading card platform. You have your auctions there as well. But I kind of wanted to do a little, as always, kind of an origin story about how it is that you got to Alt, what it was about trading cards that kind of interested you. But even before that, the businesses that you had built. So I'm wondering if you could kind of take us through that.
Yeah, so I started Alt in May of 2020. But even to back up a little bit further, I've been building businesses honestly my entire career. I started my career on Wall Street and then worked for AWS for probably a year and a change together, but then started my first company, Lob, in 2013. So it's really all that I know. And I would say, starting my career on Wall Street and studying engineering, I've always been fascinated with two things. One is just arbitrage. That's why I loved Wall Street. My dad was a trader, and just figuring out all these exotic assets and pricing and how to, buy low and sell high. That was always the dream. And then the automation part always got me excited because at least my first dream was to figure out how do you automate the buying low and sell high so that you can just build some sort of machine that would just trade money. So yeah, I found my way to Wall Street and then found that I loved automation a little bit more. And when I was at AWS, saw the opportunity to start a company called Lob, which basically does exactly what AWS did, but allowed people to send direct mail at scale. And so that was a really exciting opportunity. I've been doing that for 10 years. And then when the pandemic hit, I had been basically buying and selling cards for 5 years and more just for fun. I got into it because my dad had sent me a bunch of cards when they moved. And just like you hear a lot of the origin stories of how a lot of people get into trading cards, you get a box, you open it up and you fall in love with a card that you had 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, I started buying and selling them. I started making a lot of money. I started seeing it in a different light, I would say, than when I was a kid. Like all of a sudden I started calculating the odds and expected value, started tracking the prices. I got very invested in kind of keeping the spreadsheets. And right when I started Alt, I actually had amassed a pretty large collection. And because of the pandemic, I decided, hey, I want to go get into some real estate. How do I take all the wealth that I created in trading cards and how do I go actually diversify into another asset class? And the crazy part was that I could not get a loan from any bank. And that's where it kind of hit me. This is a new asset class. It's widely tradable. $20 billion gets traded every single year. How is there no platform like a Coinbase or a Robinhood where I can go and trade these assets, get a loan against them and start, tracking my investments? And that's kind of where it hit me. I was like, wait a second, I know a lot about this. This kind of combines all the skills that I've been building for the last 10 years. I want to go out and do that. And so that kind of what got me started to think about Alt. And that problem that I felt, I realized I wasn't the only one that had that problem. So many of my friends who had collected other stuff, whether it was sneakers, watches, art, or were angel investors, everyone had made money in some of these assets, but there was just no liquidity or transparency in these markets. And so whenever there's a big pain, I'm pretty stubborn. If no one solves it fast enough, that's where I go out and start solving it myself.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I wouldn't expect a bank to necessarily look at my card collection and say, okay, we'll lend against that. But it's funny, like those of us that are in the industry, or that follow the industry, really know the worth or the value of these cards, right? It's almost like you need to be in it to really understand, like, no, this is like a real legit asset, just like a house.
Yeah, it's the same thing that happened about 8 or 9 years ago with like crypto. People were starting to get into it. The hobbyists, the insiders understood the value, the markets, where they were traded, but none of the big players that are in it today were in it. And I think slowly it got institutionalized and people started building like financial products around it. I mean, the big bet that I'm taking is I think this category of alternative assets and collectibles is just one piece of it. I think it's a growing category mainly because those markets are uncorrelated to the S&P and people are looking for that. And then also there's just a ton of passion, nostalgia, culture associated with these assets, which does create a really unique market dynamic that does increase the prices in the long run.
Let's talk a little bit about Alt, the platform. I know you guys have your auctions are really big. I know we actually use a lot of your auctions as like the results to make good comps for our readers. But let's also talk about like the other services that you have there. If you could just kind of walk us through Alt and how you built it. One of the things that I'm really kind of impressed with is sort of like the transparency, right? Because like you'll have a card listed, and they can list it. It could be listed for whatever amount of money, but along with that will be the alt price, right? And a lot of times I found looking at the site, that price is lower than what it's selling for. So I really, really appreciate that. I'm wondering if you could take me through that whole thinking of how you built the site.
Yeah, so maybe we'll just start off with kind of the product. So at a high level, Alt is a platform that allows you to invest and borrow in alternative assets. So we have three main product lines. We have our exchange business, very much just a traditional marketplace. We have fixed priced items, so anyone can list it at any price. And then we have our auctions product. So if you want, every week we host an auction. You can send your items to auction, and people can bid on them. So that's kind of our exchange product. We have our lending product, which allows people to take a loan against any one of those assets, creating more liquidity. So if you do have a sizable portfolio and you want to go and invest in another card or diversify into real estate or use it to pay for a kid's college education, we have a product for that. And then the last one is our funds product. This is where we allow people, mostly high net worth individuals, accredited investors, and institutions, to invest in basically blue chip assets in every category that we launch. So we have a massive, almost $40 million fund just dedicated to sports cards.
Wow.
So those are kind of the three core funds. And then in terms of like how we built out the site, and I would say like what we care about the most, the first big thing, and you touched upon it, is that transparency and visibility. We spent a lot of time making sure that we could get any time an item was sold anywhere across the web, that Alt had that data and that it was clean data. If an item didn't get paid, we want to make sure that we don't have it in our system. And so if we can get that most accurate data, we can start triangulating and figuring out what is that Alt value. In the early days, I always talked about how the Alt value, the goal was to be the Zestimate, but for alternative assets.
Yeah.
The more that we can actually cater that Alt value, what we're actually doing is we're stabilizing the market. I don't think people always realize that. New markets need stability. They need support. They need confidence. And so by giving this triangulation, we're allowing people to say, hey, like this is a fair price. Like if you needed to sell something, here's how much most likely there is a buyer out there who will pay for this item.
Love the transparency and that idea about keeping the market balanced. Those are two things I kind of want to touch on. The thing I want to kind of go back on is that lending product that you have. I'm wondering, like, what kind of cards do users need to have maybe to take out a loan against their collection? Are we talking about like, a couple $100 cards, or are we talking about like these blue chip assets that are 10, 20K, maybe more?
Yeah. So we'll lend against any asset class. It's more about a portfolio of assets. So, and most people these days, they don't just have one card. So we'll look at the diversity of the portfolio. We will separate out what we believe is an investment grade card from just a commodity card. One of the things that I've been teaching people is that the card market is not a single segment. It actually, different parts of the market behave very differently. And I think these days we're quite seeing that there is the high pop commodity product. These are your Prism bases, where there's 30,000. those aren't really collectibles. Those are very much just merch of players. And so those generally do not appreciate. They very much kind of fluctuate around the same price. Whereas the investment grade stuff, generally, I would say truly investment grade is when the pop is less than 100 and there's a serial number and it's generally graded between a BGS 9.5 and a PSA 10. Those items, the market for that is very stable. And so we generally try to focus on the investment grade market.
Yeah. Can you refine that a little bit even more, like an investment grade, right? When you refer to like the population, are you talking about even a certain card where there's more than 100 made, but there's only been a certain number graded a 10 or a 9? Or are you talking about just, cards that there weren't more than 100 made?
Yeah. So, and again, this is my definition of investment grade. I think it'll change in there. It's more of a scale, right? And so I would say like the cutoff for investment grade is a very easy one. And again, there's exceptions to this rule. If the serial number, there's less than 100, I would say it's generally investment grade. Regardless of the grade, it's an investment grade card. Then if you start layering on PSA 10 and BGS 9.5, you'll get obviously, it's even more rare, more investment grade. But I would still consider an item that's low, like there's limited supply of less than 100, an investment grade card.
And you really are echoing what I kind of referenced at the opening of the podcast, this idea of when the world was going crazy and slabbing all these base prisms, they kind of overlooked, the basics, and it all comes down to scarcity.
Exactly.
And I find that interesting. What are your thoughts on that now? Because I find that now, like, there's so many parallels, right? Like a set can have 10, 15 different parallels, numbered, 25, 55, whatever the case is. Has the market diluted to that? And were cards made differently, manufactured differently, even just a couple of years ago?
So I don't think the parallels got diluted. That might be the wrong way of thinking about it. For that particular set, there's more people who can get rare cards. And so the supply of that overall set is higher. I guess that is dilution. Yeah, you're right. It is pretty diluted. I think people still chase those cards. The parallels do gamify things pretty well. Like, I'm a big collector of rainbows. I know other people like being able to collect one of the different colors. People have different preferences on colors. So I actually really like the gamification of what's been going on. I think what hasn't been done well is I think they've gotten too caught up in the gamification and they've lost out on some of the aesthetics. I think it's very obvious when a set does well. I wish the manufacturers would do a little better job on the artistry. Like my belief in the next 10 years is what you'll see a kind of a change in the manufacturing of these assets, kind of like sneakers where a lot of artists will come in. I feel like we'll get some really cool cultural artists who will come in, help design some of the products. Even maybe some of the athletes will get involved. And so we'll start seeing a lot more personality. And so that every year, you're not just chasing a card that looks the same thing with like 10% variation from the year before. There's actually a little bit more personality associated with it, or there'll be hopefully more story. Maybe just to shed a little bit more light on how I think about like rarity. What we do internally is we look at a whole bunch of different variables and we rank them. I think the first one is like when you look at the brand, every brand, right, they're kind of falling into a couple of different categories. You got your tier one brands. I always say like right now, National Treasures, Flawless, and I'll put Panini Prism on there, are really on a tier of its own. Like those are the mainstream brands, right? Then you got your tier two brands. Then there's always some tier three brands. Maybe it's a new one that Panini is launching or an off brand. And so I would say investment grade, you got to be in that top one, that top quartile. The second one is the rarity that we were talking about. So the first bifurcation is serial number, not serial number. I don't think you can have an investment grade card that doesn't have a serial number. That's just a personal thing. I'll say it. I don't think the Michael Jordan 1986 is a rare card. It's an expensive card. I don't think it's a rare card. Like the market just completely like bottomed out on that one.
There are actually a ton of Jordan 86s. It's all about that. And then that's why we go back to the PSA grade, right?
Yeah, exactly. And even in the PSA grade, there's a lot more than people think. Like if you want one, you can get one, right? And what we want is if you want one, you can't get one.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right. That's generally like if we think about a card, if it's easily accessible, I mean, it can be investment grade, but it's not really like cream of the crop card.
Okay. That's the first time I've heard that. Do you think like a card like that is sort of like a bellwether? That card reached, I don't know,
700, 750, something like that.
750, and now it's kind of, they're getting auctioned off, give or take, for about 210, 220, right? Which is not bad for, I'll take 220K for a trading card, but it just kind of shows kind of how far up the industry went. And now, like you mentioned before, hey, the 220 is still well above what it was, say 2-3 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's tough. People always ask me, like, should I buy the Jordan card? It's a nostalgic card, right? Like, if you grew up watching Michael Jordan, this is the Michael Jordan card, and it's in the best condition. And so you want that, right? But that doesn't mean that the value is going to go up. Like, if you want a rare Michael Jordan card, like the Michael Jordan PMG red or green are, to me, much better investments than the 86 Jordan. But people might not know that card, right? And so it's a completely different market. Sometimes I say, are you trying to make money, or are you trying to collect something? And depending on that answer, right, it'll lead to different results. I just bought a card yesterday. I just bought it because I loved it. I did not buy it because it was going to go up. I bought a Hakeem Olajuwon card.
Yeah.
First Hakeem card I ever had, but I just liked how it looked.
So, you don't have to tell me exactly, but do you mind sharing, like, what was it about it that's so nice,
Yeah. So it had a Hakeem logo man on it. So it's a National Treasures logo man autograph. There's only one of one on it. So I love Rarity. And I liked how it looked. So this particular set, I like National Treasures. Don't like all of the years. This one particularly, I bought the Kevin Durant of. And so I like pairing cards. It's kind of like a cool chase of mine, is finding like one or two cards that look alike and kind of pairing them up.
Yeah. Quick aside, like, what do you do with these cards? Because I'm having trouble, like, when I buy my cards, and I'm not buying logo, one-of-one logo mans, but I love looking at them, and then I kind of put them away, for a little bit, and then I'll go back and I'll look at them because it's therapy for me almost. Are you able to display all these awesome cards you have?
So not yet. Right now they all sit in the vault, but one of the things I'm working on is a pop-up museum. We own some of the world's largest or most expensive cards, most amazing collection of cards, and they are not meant to be sitting in a vault. So I'm exploring a lot of different ways for us to go out and share those cards, whether it's a one-time pop-up museum at something like the Nationals, or a longer-term exhibit. But, you want to share these with people. Kids love looking at them. I like looking at them. I don't want them to just be sitting looking at the inside walls of a safe. And then separately, there's a lot of cool companies that are starting to build out ways for people to display cards. And so I'm excited to see that innovation. I might even jump into it to help out. But yeah, I do want to be able to showcase them, whether they're on the walls or on a desk or something like that.
Let's talk about another aspect of alt, and which is, the vaulting. And I want to touch on that because, surprisingly for me, I find that it's sort of a controversial thing. It's a very convenient service that companies offer, but there's also like this segment of the industry that's kind of like, you're basically handing off your cards to somebody else. And I'm wondering if you could kind of talk about how vaulting is almost like you're not the only company with a vault, but how it really is like I don't want to say game changer, but how it's so much more better for a collector, what the advantages are for a collector.
So I wouldn't say it's better. So I'll frame it a little bit differently. I think vaulting is a commoditized product, to be quite honest. Vaulting is just like when you go to a bank and you deposit dollars. Why aren't you keeping your dollars under your mattress, right? Why do you keep them at a bank, right? So it's the exact same reason where, why do you want to keep your cards in a vault is it allows you to do a lot of different things. So one, you can buy and sell them a lot easier. You can get loans against them. And so when you're trying to take an action against your asset, right, you do need that third party, and it needs to be a trusted third party. And for the third party to be able to kind of trust you, you need to have that asset. That's one of the big reasons why people hate eBay is the amount of unpaid transactions is just getting larger by the day. Buyers aren't paying, sellers aren't sending the cards. You can't have that in a mature industry like this. And so I'm not saying you should send every single one of your cards to a vault, but when you do want to sell it, that's the best way, the most trustworthy way, I would say, to be able to sell an item. That said, I don't think any single person, unless you're just doing it for investment purposes, if you want to see your card, right, you want to have one or two at home. And so we just make it just like a bank, right? You have money in your wallet, right? When you want to put it away, you give it to the bank account. It should be the exact same relationship with all.
For sure. That's a great way of putting it. I kind of wanted to go back to what you mentioned before about, displaying the cards, which would kind of lead us into this next discussion. But you guys have big plans, right? Alt is right now you're ultra focused on trading cards. If I can say so myself, you have a thesis about trading cards as part of the larger collectible industry. Why did you begin with trading cards? And obviously, I know that you had you started collecting a few years ago. But what is it about collectible cards that then can kind of open that gateway to other collectibles?
Yeah. So the beauty about starting your own business is you obviously can decide which markets you can go into. Cards out of passion, very excited about them. But from a business standpoint, the TAM, or the total size of the market, is quite large. And so given the expertise and the size of the market, it just made sense. Like we really do believe that we can deliver the best product for our customers. Like nothing out there fits what we think the current customer needs. And so that's the vision that we're building towards on cards. When we feel like we have hit our vision within cards, we will start going into other asset classes. We've already started dabbling in other asset classes. We're always learning about other asset classes. On the lending side, we do a little bit more on other asset classes already. Same thing on the funds product. But to bring a full-on exchange and support another asset class, we want to make sure that we really get the first one right.
Can you give some insight onto like what other asset classes you're looking at, or maybe something that you see on the horizon?
I'm open to most asset classes. I think right now we're very focused on the collectibles asset classes. So kind of the broader market that people have seen. So anything from watches, sneakers, art, vintage video games, comics, coins, stamps. I mean, we're exploring all of them to understand those markets and see which ones we believe are ripe for disruption, are big markets, really strong collector base, as an example. And then, even some more on the more financial side of things that we're really excited about. A lot of our customers also invest in startups, and startups is an alternative asset class. People invest in funds. How can we provide liquidity and solutions for people who are investing in those? The goal of Alt long term, we really do want to be this platform where you can get your banking services as well as your alternative financial services. And so, if people in the future can think of us as kind of like a Chase Bank or of a Bank of America, but instead of us rooted in traditional stocks and bonds, we're guiding you on your alternatives. And so we just believe that there's a massive segment of the market that doesn't invest in stocks and bonds, and we want to win them as customers.
There's so much there. So, I mean, you believe that there's a segment of the population that are they current investors? Are we even talking about people that are currently investors in anything, right? Or are you trying to open up this investing gateway by saying, hey, you don't have to put your money in the stock market. You can actually put your money into these items, and your money's, I don't want to say just as good, but let's just put it for argument's sake, your money's going to appreciate in the same way, if not better.
So it's both. So there's already a big customer base, and I think we need to showcase that we're building a good enough product so everyone who is already investing in these assets are coming to us, right? So those are probably going to be our early adopters. But I think it is our job to grow the pie. Like we do a lot of education across the retail market and the institutional market of telling people the correlation of these asset classes is very low compared to the S&P. We teach people, why do people buy antique cars? Why do people buy sports cars or Pokemon cards? Why do people buy art, right? How does that market function? How do people think about those dollars in terms of their larger portfolio? These are things that I would say, trying every single day to put out more content and have more conversations on.
In my mind, when I was growing up, they would tell you the first thing that depreciates when you buy it is the car. The car is the worst investment that you can make.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I used to get these nice sneakers, and what I would do is I'd put them on and beat the heck out of them, go out and play. And so, it really does take kind of like a different perspective, right? Because I wish I had maybe saved some of my sneakers, and bought two pairs rather than just one. Is this like a new phenomena, or do you feel like this has been going on for a while, this idea of these alternative assets?
I think they've been going on for decades, to be quite honest. People haven't talked about it enough, and maybe the dollars hadn't gotten to a point where it made sense. But we are at that point. Like, everything at the end of the day is scarcity. Even the stock market, we forget sometimes, it's a marketplace, meaning like we have all these companies in the stock market that aren't producing any revenue. That's the same thing as buying a Van Gogh. Like, what's the difference, right? It's just potential demand. Who is the seller that will buy it after you? And so at the end of the day, all these things are the same. And so I believe even these days, the reason you buy a stock is more of like an ego flex than, especially when retail investors, than actually investing it for the sake of it being profitable one day. Like, so many of these companies haven't been profitable for 30 something years. And so, yeah, I think particularly I know what trading cards has had its kind of recent success over the last 4 years. I think in general, a lot of these collectibles, it takes around 25 years for the market to really get there. That's mainly because when people are generally buying these things or getting exposure to them, getting exposure, it's usually in the ages of 8 to 14. And then when people start getting most of their disposable income, it's usually sometime in their 30s. And so that generally takes around 25 years to happen. And so when you're in your 30s, you're like, oh, I wish I could get that thing when I was a kid that I couldn't get, right?
Yeah.
Antique card, trading card, PSA 10 Pokemon, vintage video game.
Yeah. You can't mess with that, right? Like you can't mess with your childhood or those feelings of nostalgia. And I think really that's kind of like you touched upon that, you're really touching on that is the power of that, and once you're able to have enough money to kind of go back and buy these things, it's kind of like, you're kind of living these memories that you had as a child, you're kind of going back to your childhood, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, there's always a budget that everybody has for nostalgia and things that bring them they evoke a strong emotional response, right? Everyone does that. You look at anyone's balance sheet, they have that. And now that there's a market for that, you can dabble in it just like you can do anything else. Like what patterns, what trends are about to strengthen and weaken, and you can take bets on it. It's another market. It has different dynamics, and it has kind of reached escape velocity where you can actually get enough liquidity and start taking bets in this space.
Great point. You've mentioned before kind of being bullish on Web3 and seeing what's out there. I'm wondering if you've looked into NFTs. Right now, I feel like the whole crypto and NFT space is going through some sort of like existential crisis, like what are we worth, if we're not worth this much, right? What are your thoughts on that from a collectible standpoint?
So I have a good metaphor for this. We're in the Beanie Baby phase for like NFTs. It's like when all of us thought Beanie Babies were going to be worth everything and then they weren't. That's kind of what NFTs are. There's some that are going to be worth something. I love NFTs because of the technology, and I think there's going to be a lot of really great use cases of how people bring NFTs to market. But just the digital art or the kind of the PFPs, I think they're a short-term fad. There's a lot of excitement around it, but a market needs to mature. The NFT market right now is far from mature. If anything, it just jumped so quickly, right? We went from like what takes 25 years, we probably went to year 20 already. It needs to get some stability. So I'm bullish on it in the next 10 years and 15 years. I'm less bullish on it in the next 2 years, and especially the digital art side of things.
Why not so much digital art? Like say, again, are we talking about the scarcity, or are you talking about like the artists that are kind of just trying to make a living through these NFTs?
The market, not any one of these assets. So like, for example, this is the part that I think just because it's an NFT doesn't mean that it's worth something, right? Just because I painted something doesn't mean it's worth something, right? There are people who do this for a living, right? That category of assets, those are real artistry. Those are going to be worth something, right? But that market needs to stabilize. Like how much are people willing to pay for those things? What happens during a market correction? So their NFTs at that level haven't been around long enough for the asset class to actually like figure out its market levels. So it's going to have a lot of volatility associated with it. So that's what I mean. It's not a mature asset class yet.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I was, approaching some things. There'd be some artwork that I would see online, and I thought it was really cool, but I'd be asking myself like, would you pay an artist at a gallery, $5,000 for this, especially when there were like 10 or 15 of those being made. I always kind of had to think about it that way. But so the price, what I'm trying to say is like, I felt like the prices, like you mentioned, just took off. And listen, good for the artist, if they can capitalize on the moment, great for them. And if there's somebody willing to pay that, good for them. But you're right. I just never thought it was sustainable. And I'm still wondering, and maybe I could get your thoughts on this. Like, I'm still wondering if having a Bored Ape, and I know that that's a different scenario there, is a Bored Ape worth $200,000? I don't know, because there are 10,000 of them. Each one is unique, yes. But what kind of utility are you getting from this besides that flex for the most part?
Yeah, I think you're right. Right now, it is a lot of social capital. I mean, they are trying to build real utility, community events, right? It's almost like a subscription model of sorts. Yeah, I don't know yet. That's the thing, right? People are willing to pay anything sometimes for a social flex, right? That's why you can buy like a Bugatti Veyron for just like crazy amount of money, right? And you probably never drive that thing. Sometimes I feel like, this is just a very easy social flex. Like if you're on Twitter and you want people to know that you have a lot of money, You buy a Bored Ape, you put it on your profile, and then it's kind of like, okay, that guy spent a lot of money on something that he didn't need to. He must have done something cool.
Yeah, for sure. I can't relate to that car analogy, Leore. I drive a minivan.
I don't drive a car at all, so. But yeah, that's the thing. Everyone collects different things, right? I get excited about basketball cards. Someone else gets excited about cars. There are people who get excited about NFTs. So there's something for everybody. You just need to make sure that there's enough of a marketplace of buyers and sellers to actually sustain that community and market.
I want to kind of close off a little bit on kind of your thoughts on the current marketplace. And if there's anything else that you want to add, please, by all means. So the cards are also going through a phase right now, right? People got in, let's say they got in when at the very top, maybe about a year ago or so. And maybe they're wondering, what happened to these cards? We alluded to the Jordan selling for $700K earlier. Now it's, fair market is about 200, 220. You've built businesses before, through ups and downs. What kind of, not financial advice, but what kind of, just general advice do you have in these alternative investments as we are in this downturn?
Yeah, I think for the average person who is trying to figure out, if I have money to spare right now, where should I invest? I think if you are excited about these asset classes, I think now is a really great time to get in. But you have to have an investment time horizon of at least 3 to 5 years. And you have to be able to withstand the volatility that might come from it. So I think it might be the best time to buy some really rare cards in the coming months. If you're just looking at it from an investment perspective and you don't care about these asset classes, then I would say stick to the really high-end stuff. Again, like buying LeBron right now, Steph Curry, Giannis, and Durant is so low right now. I always see these as buying is like equity for players. I really believe there's some amazing players out there. I love buying stock in them. But I wouldn't put your entire net worth in anything, right? I wouldn't put my entire net worth into cards. And so I always tell people, like, it's really great to have a piece of your portfolio in these assets because the correlation is very low. And that's actually what I care about the most, the correlation and the excitement and feelings that I get around these asset classes.
That's some great advice. What's next for alt? As you said, you're exploring other kind of alternative assets. What are kind of the next steps there in terms of building? And I am really excited about this idea that you say, like, kind of becoming this alternative bank. How do you go about doing that? And what are those steps that you're taking?
Yeah, so I won't reveal too much. We have a lot of big announcements coming in June. I'll say we'll be at nft.nyc, which should give an idea of like what are some cool things that we're going to be doing in June. But you should start seeing the evolution of the brand, the company over the next 6 months. One of the things that like the team has really tried to at least showcase, like we love moving quickly. And so we're consistently building, we're putting stuff out there, we're running experiments. Some of the things we do, we launch, it works. Some of the things we do, we launch and it doesn't work. Yeah, there's some really big bets that are about to play out in the course of the next 6 months. And I don't want to reveal too much just because I think everyone is going to be really excited when they come out.
Man, that's a great cliffhanger,
Yeah, the marketing team always yells at me because I'm a transparent person. I'm so excited about telling everybody what we've been building, but we've been spending 6 months plus on some of these newer things. And if I spoil me, I might be out of the job.
Man, well, I'm really looking forward to that. That is really interesting that you did mention that you will be at NFT NYC, seeing what the marketplace has there. But what's another way that people can get in touch with you, Leore? I mean, visiting alt, where are you active? What social media channels?
I'm big on Instagram. So I have my card account, Gems Only 8. So that's probably a great place. And then I love hearing customer feedback. So if you have any thoughts, you can just email me at leore@onlyalt.com.
Perfect. Are you posting your Hakeem on that Instagram?
I do. I post all my cards. I haven't posted the Hakeem yet. I actually have to post a big LeBron card. I just bought one of LeBron's best cards. So I'm excited to share that with the world. Awesome, man. Looking forward to it. I'm going to hop on and check that out. Leore, thanks for the time. Really appreciate it. And best of luck. Yeah, thanks for having me on, and encourage everybody to check out onlyalt.com and buy some cards. Sounds great. Take care, Leore. Have a great day. Leore has big plans for alt, and I can't wait to see them come to fruition. You can tell that he has alt on a different path that will make it one of the mainstays of the alternative asset space. As always, thank you for spending part of your day with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, let others know about it or leave a review or a comment. Until the next time, take care.